Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is Impossible Landscapes for Delta Green, the role-playing game by Arcdream Publishing, Part 2. In this video I'll be covering the history of the King in Yellow. The main purpose of this video is to help potential handlers understand how and what the King in Yellow is, as well as to demonstrate the history behind the King and provide a flowing and coherent timeline to refer back to if required when preparing to run Impossible Landscapes. We're greeted with a particularly relevant quote from the Repairer of Reputations, and then move on to the history of the King in Yellow. It talks about how to some it's just a 2-act play in a slim book about the royal court of Yttil in Carcosa. The Phantom of Truth reveals that only he wears no mask, claiming that his porcelain visage is his true face, with the revelation signalling the end of the world to the partygoers. Others claim it has an ability to leak into reality, changing perceptions into something horrifying, while still others claim that it is a seam in the fabric of the world, and that the simple act of reading it frays existence, revealing something beyond. Others claim that the King in Yellow is that figure from the play, a creature of malice made flesh, swathed in gold cloth, adorned with a porcelain mask made flesh, while others claim that the King is a code embedded in existence that is brought into being by a single symbol that causes madness and death. The yellow sign. The King in Yellow is all of these things and none of them, an entity that evades comprehension. Those that open their mind to it can have their mind laid waste or drawn into the slurry of imagination as a ghost forever. Despite these things, the King in Yellow is predictable in its manifestation. It all usually begins by a victim reading the play or seeing the yellow sign, where it infects them and spreads to others, awakening a mindset that allows forces of the King to enter into our reality. The victim suffers increasingly complex and powerful manifestations over time. Strong-willed individuals can shake it off, though usually it's fatal. These manifestations most often reflect the nature of Carcosa, with them having a very Victorian character. Think clockwork dolls and dancing figures in the distance, and they vanish as quickly as they appear. The victim will usually spread the infection to those close to them, as well as providing copies of the play in a subconscious manner as a way of relieving themselves of the burden. At its highest point, these manifestations will cause locations to spring up in the real world that seem strangely familiar, and the more they try to understand this, the more under the influence they become, and sometimes they'll find an entrance to the night world. This is described as a cell that sits between the sanity of Earth and the madness of Carcosa. It is an ever-shifting mass of near familiarity that defies the laws of the universe, and those that end up there find it to be their final resting place. A number of places in Impossible Landscapes, such as the McAllister Building, Hotel Broadalbin and the Whisper Labyrinth, are key, unchanging sites in the night world and lure lost souls towards it. Placed at the other side of the night world is Carcosa itself, where the endless masquerade ball in the royal court of Yttil continues and the King declares the end of the world forever and ever, over and over again. It is a select few that survive the night world, fewer still who arrive at the shores of Carcosa, and even less than that who ever meet the King, and only one of us has ever left the party. Before we get into the King in Yellow in Delta Green, we touch upon the various associated names, those being the King in Yellow, Carcosa and Hasta, all potent names. Some cursed tomes, such as the Vermis Mysterious and the Necronomicon, call Hasta a great old one, known as the Unspeakable, and linked to the Lake of Hali. Others believe that Hasta is the King in Yellow, while still others think that Hasta is a location in Carcosa. This may or may not be the case for any of these. Carcosa is often used to describe madness by those who have a particular calling to the unnatural. Some texts connect the 3 names to the star Aldebaran, though that has obscure meaning, while other texts use the names interchangeably to describe a force that erodes reality. In this book, all of these names are united under the banner of the King in Yellow. So after this, we go into the King in Yellow in Delta Green. The play itself predates the organisation and was first became aware of in 1951 as a reality parasite that may affect all who see it, and those who survive its invasiveness not speaking lightly about what they saw. The official records have long been purged, though, as is the way with these things, the possibility of something being overlooked remained, which could just start everything again. For those that dig deep enough, much can be learned. The first recorded Outbreak was in 1895 in Paris, where the play Le Roi en Jaune infected those artists who passed the play about in a small black book with melancholy, madness and death. One copy of this still exists of unknown provenance and no publisher mark, and was sold at auction to an anonymous buyer in 1989 for $616,000. In the original outbreak, over 200 people were murdered, killed themselves or vanished, including 2 French government officials, which caused the Deuxième Bureau to look into it, believing it written by insurgents to incite internal unrest. A crackdown was ordered, and all copies of the book were burned, those who were reading it arrested, and all records of the oddities surrounding it destroyed. Unfortunately, at this time, an acting troupe had already performed it to sold-out crowds. We then jump to the 22nd of February 1951, when a Delta Green agent called Emmett Mosby was tasked with investigating paperwork recovered in World War II. He discovered a strange French intelligence file, which was marked as reviewed by German intelligence, included as a mimeograph copy of Le Roi en Jaune in French. On the 6th of June 1951, the so-called Red Book version of the play appeared in English, marked with a yellow sign. Delta Green didn't understand it at first, and in 1952 and 1955 they would pay dearly for this. In 1952, during Operation Luna, agents arrived in New York to look into the murder of 3 children whose drowned bodies were found covered in occult symbols. Each of these children were related to NBC television employees. It was discovered that they were working on a program, the Philco television playhouse adaptation of a scene from the Red Book. Further research in Delta Green files uncovered that the source text in Le Roi en Jaune was known to have dangerous, unnatural consequences upon readers. The murders were pinned on the show's director, Gary Topchick, before it could be aired, and the production was closed. Copies of the Red Book, the yellow sign, and other unnatural items were recovered, and NBC cooperated with Delta Green to sweep it under the rug. The actual murderer was never caught, though still Delta Green didn't understand the enormity of the threat. On the 30th of August 1955, there was an incident in New York City that Delta Green were involved with under Operation Bristol. A similar body count to the 1895 outbreak happened, though it seemed to be centred upon a play called Her Grey Song. At this time, leaders of Delta Green established a static protocol to deal with the King in Yellow. Any works that referenced the yellow sign, Le Roi en Jaune, the King in Yellow, Halley, Hasta, Carcosa, Yttil, Casilda and Camilla are to be destroyed. Individuals who produce such work are to be eliminated. Individuals who seem to be influenced by the works are to be contained or eliminated at the agent's discretion. An agent's exposure to such works is to be reported to Delta Green, and those who are exposed must remain separate from the rest, and those agents not exposed become the point of contact, and any agents violating any of this are considered active threats and to be eliminated. There was also a second, secret static team of experienced agents who would observe if another team had become compromised, being available to remove the threat and destroy all vectors, even if it meant killing fellow agents. This protocol has prevented outbreaks for 40 years. Following this, we have a disinformation sheet that explains the truth of the Paris crackdown. The records were looted on the 20th of July 1945 by the US Army from the Château de Portes, a villa in France, and indicated that the play was translated to French but hinted that it had existed before 1895. The Red Book version with the looping dragon symbol on the cover, which is thought to be the King in Yellow, is said to have appeared around 1865 in England, though no copies are thought to exist. The author of the 1895 version is not named and referred to only as X or Auteur X. And though the country of origin was never indicated, the Paris police looked for an Englishman or American in connection to it. Delta Green did notice links between the play and ancient legends indicating a long and secret history. It then touches upon Emmett Mosby. The first appearance of the Red Book happened 4 months after he came into possession of Le Roi en Jaune, and the Delta Green leadership became a mess of paranoia about the text. Mosby vanished after boarding a ship to visit Europe in the spring of 1951. It then shifts to the McAllister building and Operation Alice in 1995. This is the first part of the campaign and sees the agents dealing with an outbreak in Manhattan at an art cooperative. They were looking for a missing artist who lived there called Abigail Wright, but by the time Delta Green were involved, everyone there had been half absorbed into the night world. We then move on to 2007 and Operation Active Static in Chicago. A copy of the play entered into the possession of a movie director, Victor Correll, a Latin version from 1905 called Libro Secretorum Manifesta, or the Book of Secrets. Correll read it and then proceeded to make a 22-minute film called A Song Before Travel, with those who saw it describing it as sublime and unique. And then people started turning up dead. Of the 53 people that attended the premiere, none survived beyond a month, and an Outlaws-led Delta Green team dug up all the roots of the infection, including further copies of the book and online clips of the movie. During the outbreak, an entire apartment block entered the night world for a short period, and around 300 people were dead. Both of the 2 agents who survived were killed as they were pronounced infected, and a massive cover-up was implemented to explain away the death toll. we have a piece of information regarding the fate of Gary Topchick, the man who was to direct the attempted 1952 TV adaptation called The Yellow Phantom. He was, in fact, completely innocent of the murders, but made a scapegoat as he had a pre-existing criminal record and was present at the locations of the murders. He was tried in 1953 and condemned to Bellevue Hospital in New York after being pronounced mentally incapable and spent the rest of his days there. He genuinely believed that the world was a play and everything around him were actors and all locations sets. The doctor who treated him between 1953 and 1959 vanished after renting a mask and a cloak from a costume shop. Topchick died in 1972 of a stroke. We then move on to something called the Ouroboros. There is a single question: what is the ultimate goal of the King in Yellow? Of course, the insanity of the King makes this impossible to decipher. The force of the King sweeps away that which it can't destroy. The real question is, what does the King in Yellow appear to be doing? The answer is spreading like a virus, growing, gaining a foothold in our reality, searching for vibrant minds to infect with impossibilities, and when enough of the King in Yellow is brought through, then that location joins with Carcosa forevermore. The further question here is thus, does the illusion of sane reality unmake itself? Those gifted in arts and sciences are sustenance for the King and more open to his siren song. Thankfully for reality, the kind of free thinkers that the King infects are in the minority. Those who end up serving Carcosa create copies of the King in Yellow. They sell them to fund making the costumes to perform the play, never knowing that they actually serve the King in Yellow. The King in Yellow makes itself, the reverse of the snake devouring its own tail, spewing itself further afield. It multiplies, it grows, and all of this begins with a single sign or a few words. The history of the King is unknowable, beyond our ability to understand, and as the agents work through impossible landscapes, they may learn some of the information presented here and notice odd synchronicities. We then have a section on static protocol today. In truth, it still remains in effect with the Outlaws, but this has been forgotten by the programme. It may exist in a file somewhere, but is essentially an unknown. There may be those who have been in the programme for a long time who understand the danger of the King in Yellow and recognise the need to root it out, but it's in the nature of the programme to attempt to exploit it, a potentially terrifying and life-threatening prospect. The original static team from 1955 were lost in the night world. They still hunt Delta Green agents there, forever fulfilling the protocol. It then goes into the truth of the King in Yellow, stressing that agents may struggle to understand what they find, but the truth is something that they can never understand, and to get even remotely close to understanding requires consumption by the King in Yellow. It makes the point that, at its heart, the King in Yellow's horrors are the rule, not the exception, and the very concepts of space, time and reason are simply not present in the backdrop of infinite disorder. Those in Carcosa and the night world are nearer to permanent than we are, and reality is described as simply a side effect. It then discusses, in the field, patterns of the Ouroboros. From where we stand, the King in Yellow seems like just another odd occult tradition woven through history. Those affected by Carcosa, both people and places, are drawn into the night world and can exist beyond time and space, being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. How this happens is beyond our ability to comprehend, and yet there is still a sense of beginning, middle and end. And elements for impossible landscapes can be woven into the game as and when required. The patterns are there should they be observed. It makes the recommendation that the agents should feel hunted by comprehension by the end of the campaign. We then come to the King in history. Here it goes into how many cultures at various points in time have some kind of legend of an evil creature that wears a mask, ultimately bringing death and destruction. It's worth mentioning that most of the names here won't be familiar in this section at this point, but by the end of the series you'll come to understand how everything links together. We begin in the time period of 1402 to 1460 with the Chastain family and the Chateau de Portes, and the suggestion that most of the text that describes magic, ghosts and demons being hyperbolic in nature, though there are connections. In May 1402, Signor Augustus Chastain inherited the chateau in Reims, supposedly being left it by his cousin Michael Chastain, who is said to have disappeared. Augustus and his wife and son moved there on the 28th of August of the same year. In the October, he finds a book addressed to him, written by Michael, urging him to continue the family work. The strange book is filled with ciphers and codes and credited to Solomon. Not long after this, his wife Louise fell to her death after exiting a door on the 3rd floor. In November, his servant claims to have seen strange people in masks and silver robes, along with a spectre with a flaming head, as well as the ghost of Louise. Augustus buries himself in the book, blowing his inheritance on books about codes and ciphers. In January 1403, after supposedly cracking the cipher, he keeps a book on his experiments, which seem to involve opening doors in the house and saying phrases. Augustus claims to have seen many things through the doors, including a great metropolis. Most of his servants abandon him and he seems mad. In February 1403, he claims that he has gained new information that came from a bottle and begins a new book called Hygromantia. His notes claim that he talked regularly to demons that show him signs, sigils and marks, which he lists in the book. In the March of 1403, he finishes the book and is allegedly shown the truth of the world by an entity called Baal, who informs him that his book is a livre rouge or red book that will birth the king of this world. After writing all of this in a letter to his son, he hangs himself. His estate, including Hygromantia, is sold to cover his debts. In April 1403, Edouard Allard, a personal servant to Augustus, delivers a letter to a clockmaker, Dominic Antonin, in Rouen. Augustus' son Gabriel leaves school to become Dominic's apprentice. In 1405, Edouard is found dead with a slit throat in a Paris apartment where he had been selling rare books on ciphers and codes allegedly stolen from Augustus. His face has been branded with something described as a foul mark like an eye or a dragon. We then move to 1423 and Gabriel Chastain turning 21 and given a letter from his father and the contents of a lockbox. In 1425, Gabriel buys Chateau de Portes back, having come into a fortune from somewhere. In 1426, he is pronounced as a lord, with the name changed to Signor Gabriel Chastain. Described as an artificer, he restores the chateau. In 1435, the estate is alleged to be filled with clockwork marvels, and by 1441, rumours have spread that he has published his father's book, Hygromantia, under the name Solomon, and it is seen all over the continent. In 1446, he hosts a masquerade for the nobility, where witnesses describe giant dancing marionettes controlled by wires from tracks in the ceilings that move with complexity ahead of their time. Further rumours spread that Gabriel's father had discovered the secret of perpetual motion and passed it on to his son. On 28th of August, 1460, Gabriel vanishes, leaving behind a mess of papers describing a ritual which at a later time occultists would call the preliminary invocation, alongside a sigil for a demon called Person that is scratched onto the floor in the main hall. We then have a section called the Wicked Deck of Cards, which covers the period of 1606 to 1690 and the first mention of the King in Yellow. At this time, it was not associated with a book, but a deck of tarot cards called Le Tarot de l'Empereur Jaune that supposedly turned up in England in the early 1600s. In 1606, a Lady Trafoni performs readings for 2 weeks in Cardiff, Wales, charging a penny each time. For 2 days, she pronounces bad things such as floods and calamity to all clients. The cards are gilded and of French design. She calls it the Yellow Emperor Tarot, claiming she received it on an island called Carcosa from a king. On the 30th of January 1607, a huge flood strikes Cardiff, killing 2,000 people. In 1608, near the end of his life, John Dee meets a woman called S, who hails from Carcosa, paying her for a reading. She is suspected as being the same woman from Cardiff. Dee subsequently writes a letter to Christ's College, Manchester, maintaining the special nature of her deck, and warns of a century of calamity, drought, famine, pestilence and fire for England. Dee dies shortly afterwards. The letter is presented here. We then move to the Brotherhood between the years of 1895 and 1905. Here it discusses how Le Royaume Jaune is known as a cursed book and that the player is known to derange the senses and be marked with a peculiar symbol. On his 27th of October 1865, what is thought to be the King in Yellow is reported in London, written in Latin and containing a 2-act play with no name. The mark on the cover resembles a dragon or an eye, and some crimes and atrocities are attributed to it. The book is actively suppressed and subsequently vanishes. As an aside, the millionaire Ian F. de Craig is born in Chicago. On the 26th of May 1886, an architect called Asa Darabondi is born in Paris, becoming a US citizen on the 6th of June 1887, eventually settling in Chicago. Henry M. Lundeen, a dilettante, is born there. In the October of 1894, Le Royaume Jaune appears in bookshops in Paris as a slim-back hardcover, and on the 16th of May 1895, the first documented unnatural event associated with the play occurs in Paris. Between May and June, over 200 people are murdered, commit suicide or vanish, and 2 members of the French government are influenced by it. On the 12th of July 1895, copies of Le Royaume Jaune are burned, and they believe it was written by a foreigner. On the 18th of July, plans for a performance of Le Royaume Jaune are announced by Les Coquelots. Adrien Darabondi, aunt of Asa Darabondi, is in the chorus. On the 3rd of August, a poster showing a woman holding a mask with a snake moving through the eyes is a common sight in Paris. On the 5th of August, the Surette issues a description of Auteur X, the supposed author of Le Roi and Jaune, to local stations in Paris. On the 6th of August, rehearsals for the performance begin, with Deuxième Bureau agents staking out the theatre, hoping to apprehend Auteur X. They do not appear. We then shift to the 23rd of August 1895. Le Roi and Jaune opens to sold-out crowds and is the talk of Paris, meaning it is almost impossible to obtain a ticket. The show is permitted to continue by Deuxième Bureau as they still hope to capture Auteur X. Between the 23rd and the 30th of August, reports show that members in attendance have been fainting and needing escorting out. Tickets are selling for outrageous prices. The last show on the 30th of August is broken up by the Paris police. Cast members are arrested. The show is interrupted by strangely dressed English-speaking intruders who draw firearms on stage. They flee pursued by what is described as men from China, and masked riflemen who are dressed entirely in black. On the 5th of September 1895, an attendee of the last performance, Ian F. de Craig, buys the stage set and costumes of Le Roi and Jaune and then ships them to Chicago, though he is unable to obtain a copy of the script as they've all been seized and destroyed by Deuxième Bureau. That is, except for one copy that had been archived. On the 22nd of October 1896, Adrienne Darabondi flees the French police and arrives in Chicago. She's wanted due to her performance in the chorus of Le Roi and Jaune and lives with her sister, taking care of her nephew Asa, filling his head with Le Roi and Jaune. Her sister Miriam eventually realises that she is mad. On the 1st of May 1897, Ian F. de Craig founds a religious order in Chicago called the Brotherhood of Doors. It only has 3 members, and who all witnessed the play in 1895. They become obsessed with assembling a complete script. We then move back to Adrienne Darabondi, who on the 26th of April 1898 is put on the streets of Chicago after her sister discovers she's been telling Asa that he is secret royalty from a fictional country. The 1st of May 1899 sees Ian F. de Craig placing wanted ads in newspapers worldwide calling for witnesses to the last performance to come forward. The advertisements run for 10 years and a reward is offered. Deborah Carver, a future Broadalbin resident, is born in Louisiana. On the 23rd of August 1901, Ian F. de Craig meets Adrienne Darabondi, who, living as a prostitute for the last 2 years, came across his advertisement. She tells him that she was in the chorus of Le Roi and Jaune, and de Craig takes her in, despite his wife's objections, lavishing her with riches and attention. She claims her nephew Asa is touched by the king, and de Craig hires detectives to follow the then 15-year-old Asa Darabondi. On the 6th of May 1902, Adrienne identifies the father of Asa as Castaigne, an heir to the king. Asa is attacked on a train by 2 men, but they are shot by plainclothes detectives employed by de Craig. The dead men are identified as PIs, but their employer never uncovered. Moving to June 1st, 1903, de Craig sponsors Asa's education at the Art Institute of Chicago for architecture, with him excelling beyond all expectations and being marked as talented. And in 1904, Henry Lundeen is briefly involved with de Craig and the Brotherhood of Doors through shared contacts at the Thoth Hermes Temple. Lundeen is not invited to join, and what he sees troubles him as it shakes his conception of reality. Between 1905 to 1921, Ian F. de Craig employs Asa Darabondi to build strange buildings, including the bizarre Dream House in Chicago. Replete with optical illusions and odd shapes, they're considered avant-garde, and Darabondi ends up rising to the status of local celebrity, becoming known as the Picasso of architecture, and going on to build 10 of these houses in Chicago, with much of the early promotion being secretly funded by de Craig. On the 12th of April 1905, after his aunt reveals herself to be in his life, Asa Darabondi joins the Brotherhood of Doors, as de Craig believes him to be touched by the power of the King in Yellow, and Darabondi embraces this as he is their messiah. Emma Mosby is also born in Kansas. Having spent 8 years putting Le Roi and Jaune together, the Brotherhood of Doors finished their version of the play, in Latin, on the 23rd of August 1905. Just 11 copies are made at great expense, and it is a lavender-coloured hardcover called Libro Secretorum Manifesta, or the Book of Secrets. No author or printer are listed, and de Craig starts the task of finding a performance space in Chicago, putting advertisements in papers looking for actors and singers. J.C. Lintz, a future Broadalbin resident, is born in Tennessee. We then move ahead a few weeks on de Craig being arrested on suspicion of embezzlement from his company and murdering his bookkeeper, Gabrielle Duchesse, by use of a bomb in her car, who was alleged to have been blackmailing him for over a year. The trial hits the headlines for 16 months and he is sentenced to 50 years in prison. Adrienne Darabondi is kicked out of her apartment, going back to the streets, and Asa Darabondi is given an envelope containing $500 and a copy of Libro Secretorum Manifesta by de Craig's lawyer with a note saying, "You are anointed, the king awaits us all, we shall be reunited." The next section is Hotel Broadalbin, which covers the period between 1911 and 1936. Broadalbin is described as a synthesis of ideas, dreams and human thought that congealed in the 1920s and 30s to form a place that exists in the night world even now. If you know how, you can get there, and looking back allows the traveller to clearly see the disposition of the world. It begins on the 2nd of December 1911 when the Bellefleur House in Chicago, one of Darabondi's thought buildings, is completed. Elma Lossette, a future Broadalbin bellhop, is born in Louisiana and promptly abandoned at an orphanage. On the 30th of August 1912, the location of a future Delta Green friendly psychiatric facility, Dorchester House School, is completed. It is used as an orphanage by the Boston Catholic Archdiocese. Asa Darabondi suddenly leaves Chicago for New York on the 6th of May 1921, taking up residence in an unnamed Midtown hotel answering an invitation. The truth is, it was a travel on a whimsy, and he checked into the first hotel that caught his eye, Hotel Broadalbin. New York millionaire Henry Lundeen hires Asa Darabondi on the 10th of May 1921 to build what will eventually be the McAllister Building. Lundeen, an admirer of de Craig, hopes to obtain a copy of Leroy and Joan from Darabondi, who never makes out he possesses one. Moving on to the 23rd of May 1921, Darabondi takes a phone call at Broadalbin, with the caller giving the name Bale, telling him he serves the king and tells him the name of the first child he should murder, a Peter Dvoras, aged 5, who was a rival to the throne. Darabondi duly finds the child and dispatches him by drowning. 4 days later, Peter's body is found but the killer remains unknown. On the 27th of May, a building permit is issued for Lundeen House, later to be the McAllister Building, with the architect listed as A. Darabondi, which is spelled incorrectly. The blueprints are filed on the 10th of June 1921. 2 days later, Darabondi feels suicidal and is consoled by friends at the hotel, which includes Gary T. Wilde and Rourke. 3 days after that, Darabondi, feeling desperate and horrified by what he has done, surrenders his copy of Libro Secretorum Manifesta to an unknown bookshop, believing it will break his urge to kill. A copy of the Red Book version of The King in Yellow is left outside his door in Broadalbin the next day, delivered by a man in red. He continues receiving calls, and we have a picture of Darabondi here. On the 10th of April 1922, Darabondi tells Lundeen that he is working on the hotel in lieu of payment. Moving to the 21st of May, the Lundeen House, later the McAllister Building, is finished. The future home of Dr. Elias Barbas is completed in Chicago, and Emmeline F. Fitzroy is born in the Bellefleur House. On the 1st of August, Lundeen moves into the new building with their mastiff called Abraham. He and F. de Craig vanishes from Jolet prison on the 30th of August 1925. It's revealed that he had been bribing the guard for years and created dozens of painted backdrops, set pieces and prop furniture. A huge old-looking set door is shipped to the prison at great expense in the same month, and he disappears from a locked room while working on the set. He's never seen again. The guard who was the last to see him saw him step through the fake door and disappear. The future home of Esther Samagina is finished in Boston. Moving on 2 years, on the 23rd of August 1927, Elmer Lossette, a future employee of Hotel Broadalbin, tracks down his mother, Juliette Lossette, and they later pose as a married couple. On the 6th of August, the following year, Elmer is arrested in Oregon for stealing codeine tablets, skipping bail. He arrives with his wife in New York on the 1st of September 1929, finding employment in Broadalbin, and future Delta Green agent and analyst Leyland A. Fuller is born in Philadelphia. In 1931, J.C. Lintz and Mark Labalas performed 5 bank robberies across multiple states, with Labalas being killed in the last one. Lintz flees north. Between 1932 and 1933, he arrives in New York, working sporadically as a writer of weird fiction, funding a drug habit by doing work for Leonard Lenny Teitelbaum, a captain in the Luciano crime family. On the 1st of September 1934, Lintz checks in at Broadalbin, meets Deborah Carver, and disappears beneath the hotel. A World Without Doors, a novel written by a 12-year-old child prodigy called Amelia F. Fitzroy, is released in paperback on the 30th of August 1936. She lives in the Bellefleur House in Chicago. Next, we move on to the Red Book and Static from the years 1944 to 1960. On the 4th of September 1944, a radio unit is issued to Private Reuben G. Labalas, the younger brother of dead robber Mark Labalas. On the 12th of November of the same year, a reported enemy transmission is logged by Private Labalas, a 2-minute conversation about a play called The Yellow Emperor, which he wrote down by hand. Private Labalas is killed in action at the Chateau de Portes during the Battle of the Bulge on the 17th of December 1944. Later reports indicate a circus clown was seen in the house during the battle. The dossier and bureau files are found in the chateau on the 20th of July 1945. They were taken by Delta Green as they contained information on a karatechia and are stored in Washington for 7 years. A future victim of Asa Darabondi is born in New York City, and Thomas Wright, the future father of Abigail Wright, is born in Boston. Dorchester House, the home of a school and orphanage, closes. On the 12th of April 1948, Cynthia Lachance, a future administrator of the McAllister Building, is born in Harlem. Her brother, Damien, who disappeared on the 3rd of April, is found drowned in the Harlem River, with his name later being found on Asa Darabondi's list. On the 30th of August 1950, there is a fire in Asa Darabondi's office in New York. Once it is put out, the body of Isabel Sauer, who was 5 years old, is found drowned next to a washtub of bloody water. A warrant is promptly issued for his arrest, and it is discovered that he owes nearly $200,000 to the bank and has a logbook that lists that he has killed around 20 children since 1921. A suicide note is also found. Emelina Fitzroy disappears in the Bellflower house aged 26, also leaving a suicide note. The son of Henry Lundeen, Charles, commits suicide by hanging on the 2nd floor of the future McAllister Building. On the 22nd of February 1951, Emma Mosby is given the job of poring over the World War II paperwork that was recovered and discovers the typed pages of Leroy and Joan in French. He creates an English translation and adds it to the file. The King in Yellow appears in English for the first time in the Red Book on the 6th of June 1951, bearing a strange symbol that is known as the yellow sign on the cover. Found at a murder scene in Los Angeles, it is put upon a watch list of occult texts. On the 23rd of October 1951, Emma Mosby heads to Europe for spring vacation and is quoted as saying, "The continent first and then to the court." He's never seen again. Detective Graham Guradanda, the person who will lead the Abigail Wright disappearance, is born in New York. Moving to the 30th of April 1952, Henry M. Lundeen is found dead in the future McAllister Building. The cause of death is determined as a massive stroke, though he is dressed in strange plastic silver robes and wears a mask made of papier-mâché. On the 9th of May 1952, the attention of Delta Green is caught by a report regarding the ritual drowning of 3 children. They're all associated with the NBC Philco television playhouse in New York. A further investigation, Operation Luna, finds an attempt to make a scene from The King in Yellow into a short TV programme and is considered an unnatural influence. Delta Green finds out about how potent the yellow sign is and agents seize copies of the Red Book. Gary Topchick, the director, is framed for the 3 murders and jailed, though the real killer is never found. Topchick is, at a later date, deemed insane and committed to Bellevue Hospital in New York City. Moving on to the 23rd of June 1952, an intelligence analysis is written for Delta Green by Leyland A. Fuller, where he recognises the English translation of a document he read in war records the previous year. Turning in his report along with a copy of the Red Book edition, he commits himself to Bellevue Hospital, remaining there until his death in 1995. Future resident of the McAllister Building, Roger Caron, is born in Bellevue while his mother is visiting her sister in New York City. By the 30th of August 1952, the leaders of Delta Green have arrived at the conclusion that Emmett Mosby was the person responsible for the translation of The King in Yellow and worked to have it published. The following year, on February the 3rd, the Star Corporation purchases the Lundeen estate, which includes the future McAllister Building. A future Delta Green member and director of the Dorchester House Psychiatric Facility, Dr. Richard Dallin, is born in Texas. Just under a month later, the Lundeen house is changed to an 11-unit apartment building and renamed the McAllister Building. David Langford, a future cable installer who becomes lost in the building in 1995, is born. On the 30th of August 1955, an off-Broadway play called Her Grey Song, which is based on the Red Book, opens and closes on the same night in New York City. People in attendance go insane or die in strange circumstances, and Delta Green get involved with Operation Bristol. A future Delta Green agent, Dr. Elias Barbas, is born, as well as Carmen Wagner, a future editor for Roger Caron. Between August the 30th and the 12th of September, Delta Green hunts and kills the actors from Her Grey Song, the surviving audience members, and all copies of the Red Book. On the 1st of September 1955, the Delta Green leadership create the Static Protocol, which is designed to manage the threat of the King in Yellow. This involved the creation of a static shadow team: Eric K. Carter, Virgil Griffith, Ronald Burback and Frederick Colwell, who were sent to clean the infection and check that the Bristol team had not been affected. 3 days later, Agent Albert Hale kills 2 agents after being compromised and is subsequently killed by the Static Shadow team. 14 witnesses, 2 actors and the director remain undiscovered. On the 7th of September, the Static Shadow team doesn't check in, and 2 days later, 2 members of the team, Carter and Burback, are discovered dead in a New York hotel room with the skin missing from their faces. Colwell is discovered to be barricaded in his New York home and says that Griffiths killed the others, and another person, a man wearing a mask, was there. He says nothing more, claiming it was contagious. On the 11th of September 1955, the last member of the team, Virgil Griffith, is chased across New York City by Delta Green agents. He's tracked to Madison Square Park wearing a face mask and wielding a shotgun and vanishes into thin air, never to be seen again. Moving ahead 5 years, Asa Darabondi is declared legally dead at the request of his mother, 91-year-old Miriam Darabondi. Future Delta Green agent Marcus is born in Queens. The next period covered is titled The Haunted Building. This covers 1967 to 1995. On the 6th of May 1967, Art Life by the McAllister Building from the Star Corporation. Michelle Van Fitz, a future resident here, is born in Ohio. Jumping to the 4th of April 1968, Thomas Wright meets his future wife Ellen Caladetta at a dance at the reopened Dorchester House School in Boston, having been introduced by a strange old man dressed in a purple suit called Asa. A future McAllister Building resident, Louis Post, is born in California. On the 22nd of January 1969, Abigail Wright is born, and on the 3rd of April 1969, Thomas Manuel is born in New York. Both are future McAllister Building residents. Moving ahead, future Delta Green agent Michael Whitworth is born in Michigan on the 23rd of May 1980. On the 12th of October 1984, Dr. Richard Dallen serves on Operation Lost Weekend as a Delta Green friendly, and Timothy Ball, a future inmate at the Dorchester House Psychiatric Facility, is born in California. Moving on to the 2nd of November 1986, the book Mental Illness in the Workplace and Beyond is allegedly printed by Grolier International, with the author being Devon Greenbrier. It references Searing, a company that will later be involved in a negative way with Delta Green, and Ophelia Sitry, the future fiancée of Delta Green agent Michael Whitworth, is born in Florida. Also, sometime in 1986, Delta Green founds the St. Infinite Foundation, a charity that has the only function of funneling money to Dr. Richard Dallen to run a facility for the treatment of mental trauma. This takes the form of Dorchester House in Boston. On the 10th of April 1988, Abigail Wright moves into the McAllister Building. Just under a month later, Abigail's mother Ellen collapses with a brain hemorrhage, shouting, "He's coming for my baby, Tom. Stop him." She never becomes conscious again. On the 30th of August the following year, Dorchester House opens, and exactly a year later Roger Carron moves into the McAllister Building, along with Michelle Van Fitz on the 2nd of March 1992, Thomas Manuel on the 21st of August in the same year, and Louis Post on the 2nd of April the following year. On the 28th of May 1984, Ed Myler Guison, a future patient of Dorchester House, is born in Los Angeles. Moving on, Abigail Wright is mugged by a strange old man in a silver robe and mask close to the roof door of the McAllister Building, demanding that she show him where the tunnels are, while knocking her down and going through her possessions. Abigail reports it to the police. On the 22nd of February 1995, while out shopping with her father, she comes across a strange bookshop in Lower Manhattan and finds a copy of the Red Book version in a bargain bin. By the next day, she has shared it with everyone else in the McAllister Building, with her copy ending up on Michelle Van Fitz's bookshelves. By the 12th of March, all of the tenants stop leaving the McAllister Building, and on the 20th of March, David Langford, a cable TV repairman, enters the building and vanishes. Arthur and Elaine Manuel are turned away from the building on the 21st of May 1995 by a man with a suitcase and a dog who tells them that Thomas doesn't live there anymore. And on the 19th of April, Roger Carron makes a final call to his editor Carmen Wagner, leaving a message. Abigail finds the night floors on the 6th of May, coming fully under the influence of the King in Yellow. Between the 10th and the 28th of May, Abigail creates a shrine to the King in Yellow in her apartment, using the night floors to obtain strange materials. On the 1st of June, the first page of a play is left in front of all the apartments in the McAllister Building, with characters based on the tenants. Esther and Philip Samagina marry in Boston. On the 4th of June, Abigail's father Thomas checks the apartment after many failed attempts of calling her. He finds the shrine and calls the NYPD. Detective Graham Biodanda is assigned to the case and the apartment is checked by the police. Between the 6th and 10th of June, all tenants of the McAllister Building are interviewed, along with her friends and associates. Notably, all interviews are in the daytime. By the 22nd of June, the case is put on the back burner by the NYPD due to a lack of leads. A few weeks later, on the 10th of July, the New York Post publishes an article on Abigail's disappearance, and on the 4th of August, her visa is used to buy cigarettes in Maryland. This is noticed and an interstate kidnapping is suspected. The FBI are drawn in. 2 days later, the FBI travel to Maryland to look at the credit card use, and the following day, a Delta Green friendly recognises the occult symbols from her apartment as being related to the cult tome Ars Goetia. Delta Green are alerted. On the 9th of August, the investigation in Maryland is brought to an end due to a lack of leads, and the next day, the FBI send a team to catalogue Abigail's apartment. Delta Green insert a team into the case under Operation Alice. On the 1st of January 1999, a source of information and fear to those Delta Green agents in 2015, a Sears satellite phone, becomes active. Henry Samagina, the son of a head nurse of Dorchester House, is born. Jumping ahead to the 23rd of August 2006, a copy of Libro's Secretorum Manifesta is auctioned off from Cook County Jail to an occult author from Chicago, Louisa Reggie, along with the personal effects of Ian F. de Craig, as he is writing a book on the Chicago Thoth Hermes Temple, but is unable to read it as it is written in Latin. On the 17th of October the same year, Louisa Reggie's boyfriend, Victor Correll, who is fluent in Latin, begins reading The King in Yellow and begins working on a screenplay on it by the 22nd of October. On the 31st of October, Victor goes on the Kiss FM Halloween party as a giant robed figure in tattered gold, wearing a white mask, and hands out 23 photostatic copies of the play in Latin as a prop. These are actually real copies. By the 12th of November 2006, he begins filming A Song Before Travel, a short film based on The King in Yellow. This is completed by the 2nd of April 2007 and puts a short 2-minute trailer on YouTube. The video was flagged by Delta Green due to the incorporation of the yellow sign, and agents struggled to have the video removed. By the 9th of April, the video has received 190,000 views, catching the eye of a Hollywood producer, Simon Kirkland, who opens dialogue with Correll, finding him to be strange and fascinating. On the 5th of May 2007, A Song Before Travel has a single showing at the Grand Theatre in Chicago, one of the Thor houses designed by Asa Darabondi. It is interrupted by a group of people breaking through the fire door and rushing in front of the screen, including one in a gas mask. The following day, the first death relating to A Song Before Travel appears just 44 minutes after the screening ends. A Delta Green outlaw team activates Operation Active Static to try and stop the outbreak in Chicago. Louisa Reggie is found hanged at her home with a whole month having passed since it happened. Between the 6th and the 22nd of May 2007, the Delta Green agents from Active Static commit acts of theft and murder to contain the King in Yellow outbreak. Copies of the play and the Correll film are found and destroyed. The night world opens in Correll's apartment and Correll almost escapes. 3 Delta Green agents are confronted by a figure that Correll calls the King and are killed. 2 other Delta Green agents capture Correll and flee. On the 23rd of May, A Song Before Travel is finally purged from YouTube using copyright violation orders and mercenary black hat teams wiping the trailer from servers worldwide. While in custody, Correll vanishes. The 2 agents who captured him are eliminated after suffering mental instability, and an estimated 300 people have died after a single exposure to the King in Yellow. Jumping ahead to the 28th of May 2010, Ed Miller Wist, a future patient at Dorchester House, kills his entire family on his 16th birthday with a shotgun, claiming that they were all wearing masks and mocking him. No masks are ever found. Moving on to the 3rd of April 2014, Ed Miller Wist is declared insane and is eventually moved to Dorchester House for treatment. On the 6th of May 2015, the night world starts manifesting there. The following day, nurse Esther Samagina is shown the yellow sign and compromised, and the day after that, Ed Miller Wist starts seeing and hearing messages all over Dorchester House. He begins keeping a reputation book. On the 10th of May, Esther shows her son the yellow sign. She's instructed to make costumes at Dorchester House and buys a Sears sewing machine and supplies. The following day, Henry Samagina kills his father Philip at home, placing his body in the upstairs bathtub. Esther starts sending costumes down the newly appeared chute in her home to Hotel Broadalbin. On May the 12th, Henry starts putting together a copy of The King in Yellow called The Phantom Saith. He does this by listening to his father's corpse and cutting and pasting sections of the script from pre-existing items. Moving ahead to the 17th of May, Esther Samagina is instructed at Dorchester House to create Encounter Group, somewhere the strangers can meet to share concerns and stories. She constructs masks and costumes and then is surprised to find out that Encounter Group already exists. She attends the group wearing a mask and discovers all the attendees are wearing masks. She announces the group by sending photocopies around her neighbourhood. On the 21st of May 2015, all staff at Dorchester House are compromised by the King in Yellow. On the 28th of May, Dr. Richard Dallin informs Dr. Elias Barbas that a number of Delta Green agents who had been in long psychiatric isolation at Dorchester House had vanished from locked rooms and restraints. The following day, Dr. Barbas is activated to investigate the vanishing agents there. He believes it's Delta Green activating him, but it is in fact the King in Yellow through Dr. Dallin. By the 1st of June, Dr. Barbas is compromised and travels the night world to Dorchester House. On the 2nd of June, a man who fits the description of Emmett Mosby delivers a typed English copy of The King in Yellow to Dr. Barbas at his home in Boston. Dr. Barbas reads it and is driven wildly insane. He tears the book up and wears it on his skin underneath his clothes, believing he is the author. He feels compulsion to write it out over and over again. On the 3rd of June, Henry Samagina builds a cardboard model of Carcosa, and the following day Dr. Barbas brings back strange papers from the night world that include plans for mechanical creatures, occult symbols and copies of the Dizzy Bureau file, storing them in the trunk of his car. 2 days later he begins building the Lion, a mechanical guardian that he found instructions for in the night world. On June 8th, Dr. Barbas assaults Detective Emmeline Scayan from the Boston Police Department. According to the officer, he was writing something longhand which he hid before the attack. 2 days later, Dr. Barbas sends an email to Emmeline offering an apology and begins building something called the Scribe, again based on plans from the night world. The Phantom Saith is completed on the 22nd of June 2015 by Henry Samagina, and he vanishes through the mirror at the family home. On the 24th of June, Dr. Barbas' strange behaviour is noticed by Delta Green, and Operation Mercy is formed to investigate activating DEA Special Agent Michael Whitwer under the pseudonym of Agent Vega. On the 28th of June, Agent Vega and his team arrive in Boston, checking into the Boxer Hotel and subsequently tailing Dr. Barbas, ultimately breaking into his car and stealing the Dizzy Bureau files. The following day, Whitwer buys a burner cell phone and Barbas orders red leather journals from Amazon. By the next day, the Dizzy Bureau files have infected the Boxer hotel room, with the team noticing that the file bleeds text into other texts. On the 5th of July, the Operation Mercy team take photographs of a person leaving Dr. Barbas' house. He is later identified as Delta Green agent Emmett Mosby, who has not aged a day in the 64 years he has been missing. The following day, the Operation Mercy team retreats to the Boxer Hotel before breaking and entering into Dr. Barbas' house. One of the agents, Venus or FBI Special Agent Geneva Brown, sleeps in the Boxer Hotel room and the dream window appears. The team find it difficult to deal with and retreat to another room while still deciding what to do. On the 7th of July, agents Geneva Brown, Michael Whitwer and Roger Thelamis return to the Boxer Hotel. The dream window is accidentally activated by Whitwer while he sleeps. Brown enters it and then something goes wrong. It fogs over and then moments later she exits through the wall screaming "No mask, no mask," subsequently attacking the team. She's killed in a hail of gunfire by Thelamis. The team clean the room, reopen the window and send Brown's corpse through it to hide it. The gunfire is never investigated. The next day the Mercy team disappears. They're captured by the compromised personnel at Dorchester House, sedated and held at the facility, with the thinking being that they were there to capture Dr. Barbas. On the 8th of June, Whitwer's fiancée, Ophelia Citri, calls the DEA when he fails to answer his phone or call her. They have no record of him travelling, saying he's on vacation, and open an official inquiry into the financial irregularities of his accounts. On the 10th of July, Dr. Barbas has begun printing and delivering copies of the Red Book to unknown parties via the Red Door in his home. The following day, Trooper Michael Dawkin and other friends attempt to talk Dr. Barbas down from his strange and erratic behaviour. They notice mechanical parts laying about his house and an attractive woman dressed in white. On the 2nd of August 2015, Ophelia Citri receives a box containing a brass statue of a cherub along with a note that depicts the yellow sign. This has been sent from Dr. Barbas. Between the 4th and the 9th of August, Ophelia puts up posters and stickers of the yellow sign around 2 nearby neighbourhoods, as well as a photo of it on her Facebook page on the 13th of August. She starts digging underneath her house and the brass cherub comes to life and starts patrolling her home. On the 27th of August, the machine called the Scribe spontaneously creates a cheat sheet about the player's agents and prints invitations to meet Dr. Barbas. The following day, Dr. Dallin and Barbas report to Voices that they are convinced the Delta Green that agents in the psychiatric isolation in Dorchester House have again vanished from locked rooms and restraints. In reality, via the power of the King in Yellow, the agents are contacted by Dr. Dallin and Barbas, not Delta Green. Finally, on the 1st of September 2015, the agents are invited to a birthday party by Richard Zialoni at the Gateway Bridges restaurant, beginning Operation India Moon. Okay, that concludes part 2 of Impossible Landscapes. Part 3 will be a breakdown of the first part of the campaign. the night floors.